sounded crazy. A human foot had been mailed to Conservative Party headquarters.
His torso was found stuffed in a suitcase on a...
The suspect is a 29-year-old model and self-styled porn actor named Luka Magnotta.
The most we know about Luka Magnotta comes from the digital trail he created of himself.
At first, it sounded unbelievable, almost like something out of a crime thriller. A human foot had been mailed to a political office. Soon after, reports escalated. A suitcase was discovered containing human remains. What began as a shocking mystery quickly turned into one of the most disturbing and widely followed criminal cases of the digital age. The suspect was identified as a 29-year-old man, Luka Magnotta. Known online as a model and self-promoted adult film actor, much of what authorities and the public knew about him came from the internet. He had spent years building a digital persona, carefully crafted images, videos, and stories that blurred the line between reality and fiction. But the story of Luka Magnotta did not begin with headlines, police sirens, or international manhunts. It began quietly, almost invisibly, with a young man who seemed, at first glance, unremarkable. Born under a different name, he grew up in a fractured household, marked by instability and emotional distance. His early life was shaped by broken relationships, parents separating, guardians changing, and a constant sense of disconnection. Those who later examined his past would point to these years as formative, though at the time, there was little to distinguish him from countless others navigating difficult childhoods. He was described as quiet, not disruptive, not memorable. The kind of person who could pass through a room without leaving an impression. Yet beneath that surface, something was developing, something harder to define. As he grew older, isolation became a recurring theme. School offered no real escape. He struggled socially, often feeling like an outsider. There were signs of deeper internal battles, periods of depression, a need for validation, and an increasing fixation on identity. He underwent psychiatric evaluation and was prescribed medication, with warnings about the importance of maintaining treatment. But stability never quite took hold. By his early 20s, he began searching for a way to reinvent himself. The transformation was deliberate. He changed his name, reshaped his appearance, and stepped into a new identity, one that was crafted not just for himself, but for an audience. The internet became his stage. At a time when online platforms were rapidly expanding, he found an environment where reinvention was not only possible, but encouraged. He built profiles, uploaded photos, and presented himself as a model, living a glamorous lifestyle. Expensive cars, luxury settings, travel. Much of it fabricated or exaggerated, but convincing enough to attract attention. Attention became the goal. He appeared in small media segments, attempted to break into television, and promoted himself relentlessly. Every post, every image, every video was part of a larger effort. To be seen, to be noticed, to matter, but recognition remained just out of reach. Rejections piled up, auditions failed, opportunities disappeared. The image he projected online did not translate into real-world success. And with each setback, the gap between who he was and who he wanted to be seemed to widen. Those who knew him began to notice patterns, constant need for validation, an obsession with appearance, a tendency to exaggerate, to fabricate, to construct alternate realities where he was more important, more admired. It wasn't just ambition, it was something deeper. Created multiple online identities, entire networks of profiles that supported and praised him. Blogs, forums, social media accounts, many of them traced back to him. He built a digital echo chamber, a world where he could control the narrative. In that world, he was successful, desired, famous. In reality, he remained largely unknown. Over time, his interests began to shift. The content he consumed grew darker. He became fascinated with notoriety, particularly individuals who had gained attention through violence. It wasn't just curiosity. It was fixation. He didn't just observe. He began to imitate. Rumors appeared online, linking him to notorious figures, stories that were untrue. But instead of denying them quietly, he amplified them, then denied them publicly. It was a cycle designed to generate attention, and it worked briefly. But it wasn't enough. What came next marked a turning point, not just in his life, but in how strangers across the world would come to know his name. A video surfaced online. At first, it circulated quietly, shared within small communities, but the reaction was immediate and intense. It depicted an act of cruelty so disturbing that it sparked outrage across the internet. Within hours, it spread rapidly, drawing attention from users determined to identify the person responsible. Unlike traditional investigations, this one began in a decentralized, digital space. Ordinary people, many of them strangers to one another, came together with a shared goal: find the individual behind the video. They analyzed every frame, background details, objects, reflections, sounds. Nothing was too small. A vacuum cleaner model, a piece of furniture, lighting patterns, even the way shadows fell across the room. Each detail became a clue, part of a puzzle that thousands of eyes were trying to solve. This was not law enforcement. There were no official resources, no centralized authority, just determination. And slowly, patterns began to emerge. A name surfaced. At first, it was just a possibility. But as more information was uncovered, images, posts, connections, the pieces began to align. The same individual who had spent years crafting an online persona was now being linked to something far darker. The irony was impossible to ignore. The very digital footprint he had built to gain attention was now being used to track him. Yet even as suspicion grew, certainty remained elusive. He had spent years creating confusion, multiple identities, altered images, false locations. He blurred the lines between truth and fabrication so effectively that even when clues pointed toward him, doubt lingered. Still, the online investigators persisted. They mapped his movements, traced his accounts, and compiled evidence. Eventually, they brought their findings to authorities, urging them to act. But the response was limited. Without direct, verifiable evidence, without a clear location or immediate threat, there was little that could be done. The case remained largely within the digital realm, difficult to translate into actionable law enforcement measures. For the investigators, it was frustrating. They believed they were watching something escalate. They saw patterns, warning signs, trajectory that seemed to be moving towards something worse, but they couldn't stop it. And then, for a time, everything went quiet. The intensity faded. The investigation slowed. Attention shifted elsewhere. But he had not stopped. Behind the scenes, the pattern continued growing, evolving, becoming more dangerous. The need for attention had not diminished. If anything, it had intensified. And soon, it would cross a line that could not be ignored. Silence can be deceptive. For months, there had been no major developments, no viral videos, no widespread outrage, no clear signs of escalation. To many, it seemed like whatever had happened before had simply faded away, absorbed into the endless stream of internet content. But beneath that quiet surface, something was building. The same patterns remained: the need for attention, the manipulation of identity, the careful construction of narrative. Only now, the scale was changing. There were hints, subtle at first, cryptic posts, strange messages, references that didn't fully make sense on their own, but felt deliberate. To the casual observer, they were easy to ignore. But to those who had followed the earlier investigation, they felt familiar, calculated, intentional. It was as if someone was preparing an audience. Around this time, He resurfaced in different locations, or at least appeared to. Online posts suggested travel, different cities, different countries, but as before, much of it was misleading. Images were altered. Backgrounds were staged. Details were inconsistent. Tracking him became nearly impossible. Yet there was one place where he remained consistent: the digital world. He continued to post, to engage, to provoke, and in doing so, he maintained control over the narrative. Then came the warnings. Messages began to appear, some direct, others more subtle, hinting at something more serious. References to violence, to escalation, to a future act that would surpass anything that had come before. First, they were dismissed. Online spaces are filled with exaggeration, performance, and empty threats. But for those who had been tracking him, the pattern was too familiar to ignore. They had seen this before. The build-up, the hints, the desire to create anticipation. They tried, once again, to alert authorities, to communicate the urgency they felt. But the same barriers remained: lack of concrete evidence, jurisdictional limitations, uncertainty about location. It was a race without a finish line. And then, suddenly, everything changed. A video appeared online. Unlike anything before, it spread quickly, not just within niche communities, but across broader platforms. Its content was immediately recognized as deeply disturbing. Those who saw it understood that this was no longer speculation, no longer a possibility of escalation. It had happened. Around the same time, a missing persons case began to unfold. A man had failed to show up for work. Friends grew concerned. Attempts to contact him went unanswered. Then came the discovery: human remains found in a suitcase. The connection, once made, was undeniable. What had been building online had crossed into reality in the most irreversible way. Authorities moved quickly. The case, now unmistakably severe, triggered a full-scale investigation. The name that had circulated in online forums and amateur investigations was now at the center of an international manhunt. Luka Magnotta was no longer just a digital figure. He was a fugitive. What followed was a pursuit that spanned countries, driven by both traditional law enforcement and the lingering digital trail he had left behind. Ironically, the same online presence he had cultivated meticulously, obsessively, became one of the key tools in tracking him. Every post, every image, every interaction held potential clues. Meanwhile, media coverage exploded. The story spread globally, capturing attention not just because of the crime itself, but because of how it had unfolded. This was not a case that had emerged. Suddenly, it had been building, visible in fragments across the internet, observed by individuals who had tried to raise alarms. That realization added another layer to the narrative. Could it have been prevented? It's a question that lingered, difficult to answer, and impossible to ignore. As the search intensified, sightings were reported. Tips came in from different parts of the world. Each lead was followed, each possibility examined. And then it ended. He was found. Not hiding in isolation, not attempting to disappear entirely, but still connected to the very thing that had defined him, the internet. Reports indicated he had been viewing content about himself, following the coverage, watching the narrative unfold. Even at the end, the attention remained central. The arrest brought a sense of closure, but not resolution. The story raised questions that extended far beyond one individual. It highlighted the complex relationship between identity and the digital world. between attention and behavior, between observation and intervention. Those who had followed the case from the beginning were left with conflicting emotions. They had tried to act, tried to warn, tried to piece together a pattern that, in hindsight, seemed clear. Some wondered if their attention had inadvertently fueled the behavior they were trying to stop. Others questioned whether more could have been done, whether louder warnings, stronger evidence, or different approaches might have changed the outcome. There were no easy answers. What remained was a case that forced people to confront uncomfortable realities. The power of the internet to amplify identity, the dangers of seeking validation without limits, the challenge of recognizing when online behavior signals real-world risk, and perhaps most unsettling of all, the realization that, in a world where anyone can create an audience, the line between performance and reality can blur in ways that are difficult to detect until it's too late. In the end, the story was not just about one person. It was about a system, social, digital, psychological, that allowed something to grow, unnoticed by some, underestimated by others, and ultimately impossible to ignore. A story that began with disbelief and ended with consequences no one could undo.